Hello and welcome to our PowerPoint on inherited disorders. In this one, we're specifically focusing on family tree diagrams. So a family tree diagram, or a pedigree diagram that they sometimes refer to them as, should tell us a little bit about who carries which genes within a particular family. As usual, I would advise you to have a pen and a piece of paper handy in at points where we have questions and the ability to test yourself, you would obviously pause your PowerPoint to be able to check your own answers. Okay, so we're going to start off looking at some inherited disorders um, and how they kind of get passed on. They're passed from parents to offspring in genes. Um, the ones that we have looked at in the previous video are going to be polydactyly and cystic fibrosis. Those two are chosen deliberately because polydactyly is a dominant disorder. It's carried on a dominant allele, but cystic fibrosis is a recessive disorder. Because of that, polydactyly, you only need to receive one allele from one parent before you have that particular disorder, where cystic fibrosis, you would have to have two alleles from one from each parent. So in this example, just a practice exam question, we have two people, Ali and Mary, who do not have cystic fibrosis. They probably weren't even aware that they carried cystic fibrosis, but their baby does, it's got it. What does this tell us about Ali and Mary's genes for this disorder? And again, this was a topic for the last video. Ali and Mary must both be carriers. They are recessive, so they each have a gene, a recessive allele for cystic fibrosis. It's the faulty one, the one that doesn't work properly, but it is recessive. So in both of them, they've got the dominant one, which keeps them healthy, but their baby has only received recessive ones from both Ali and Mary. So in family tree diagrams, we're looking at pedigree trees. We can see the pattern of inheritance for things like cystic fibrosis. In this one here, we have two grandparents right at the very top. If you follow the lines down from the grandparents, wherever that line branches down to another child, we can see that that they are related. Okay. Um, what it doesn't kind of point out to us, I'm going to just circle here those ones that uh, are related to those grandparents. So the ones next to them that aren't actually joined to the grandparents, those are the wives and husbands, the partners of the children, but the children are actually joined with a line. We can see that those people have decided to have babies themselves, so then we have a third generation underneath. It's important to pay attention to the key that comes along with any pedigree or family tree diagram. Okay, so in this one here, if we're looking at the key right down here at the bottom, okay, it suggests that males are going to be square, and if they are affected by this particular illness, whatever that is, that they are going to be coloured in black. If they have died and are no longer part of the family in that sense, then they have a cross through them, so we can see there is a line through them. Again, females who are unaffected are going to be circles, affected are going to be coloured in black, and those ones with a line through them unfortunately have died. So in this one here, this example, we're looking at something called sickle cell anemia, and effectively it's a disease that affects our red blood cells. Okay, it makes them like a sickle shape, like a thin shape, um, and they don't carry oxygen as well as they probably should do. It is a recessive condition, so it's carried on a recessive allele. And if we have a look at our family tree diagram, pedigree diagram, again, we have a key next to it. Males are still square, females are still circles. If they're affected, they have been coloured in, and if they are not coloured in, it's because they are unaffected. So if we're looking for a male with the condition, we are looking for an affected male. That would be a coloured in square. And there are some of them that have been given letters. So we're going to find the one of those letters with the coloured in square, which obviously would be E at the bottom of here. Okay. Sickle cell anemia is a recessive condition. Can we find a female with the condition? So this time we're looking for a coloured in circle, which is a female, and obviously we're looking at A at the top. And then this time round, who is a female without the condition? So we're looking at a non-coloured in circle, and in that case, B would be our example. Whose genotype must be little a, little a? So little a in this case, because sickle cell anemia is a recessive condition, you would have to get little a to have the disease, and therefore E must have little a, and A must have little a, little a. Okay, they've both got that. Whose genotype could be big A, little a? Now, this is probably the most complicated question they can ask on here. So effectively what we're looking for is somebody who is unaffected, but who then, and the answer here always lies in the children, right? We always have to look at the children from them. So if we've got somebody who does not have the disease, but has had a child who has got the disease. So in this case, B has not got the disease, but has a child that has the disease. If we stick a little arrow down here, all right, and both C and D have both not got the disease, but have managed to have a child with the disease. That would be E. So both of those guys there would also have big A, little a, or heterozygous as a genotype. So we're going to have a little go at this one, and again this is just for you to have a little practice. You can see the question at the top, and I'm just going to pause for a second. You might want to pause your video to give you time to actually have a look at it. So the question asked us, how can we tell that sickle cell anemia is a recessive disease? And all we're looking for, it's always in the children, we're looking for E down here, because E somehow managed to get this disease, even though neither of E's parents, C and D, neither of them have got it. What that tells us is that actually both C and D carry it, and therefore it must be recessive. If it can be hidden behind the dominant one, then it's obviously not the dominant allele, it is a recessive allele. So the other element of this that we want to have a little think about is the idea that maybe we might be able to prevent this before it ever happens. Okay, so rather than waiting for a baby to be born with cystic fibrosis and then having to treat it, can we actually spot it in advance? We can see on this example here that, that these two parents could be tested for the presence of a genetic disorder. So that we're looking at two unaffected people who both know that they are carriers, they have this in their family. And we can see that of the possible babies that they might have, the blue one on the left hand side has capital R, so they would not be affected at all, nor would they have any chance of passing it on in the future. The two in the middle, who are both purple, they are capital R, little r, so therefore they are both healthy, but when they have babies, they will also need to try and make sure that they don't pass on that little r if they don't want the baby to have the disorder. And finally, we've got somebody on the right hand side who's little r, that person would be affected. So there is a 1 in 4 chance, 25%, that couple there would have a baby with the disorder. Screening could be used by couples like these who carry those genes, and basically we could check to see whether the embryos that they've created would have little r before they then implant them back into man. There's some issues surrounding screening. So screening isn't universally accepted by everyone, and they're around kind of economic, social, and ethical issues. So when we're talking about economic issues, there could be a cost associated with the screening. Who should pay that cost? Because most of our medical treatment in the UK is completely free at the point of use. It's not free in that the taxpayers do end up paying for it, but the people who need the screening would get it for nothing. Um, if it's an expensive screening procedure, then is that an acceptable use of public money? I guess is the question. Um, Socially, potentially the children that the couple have already got might have issues with the fact that they're going to have a child that either has this disorder and has to be looked after, or they might have a problem with the fact that the parents uh, didn't screen them but are screening the next child, or whatever it is. So there might be social issues around that. And then ethically as well, should we ever really be able to decide which genes and which alleles are passed on to our children? Is that not kind of uh, playing God? Is it acceptable when we remove genes for cystic fibrosis? Would it also be acceptable if we remove genes for red hair or a certain skin colour? Or do we start to then go, actually, that's not acceptable at all? So we've got an exam question here that asks you just to match up the stuff on the left with the stuff on the right, and it's the reasons, the possible decisions that might happen as a result of having a particular test. And we've got four different disorders down the left-hand side that can be tested for. I would advise you to just pause the video here at this point and match those. Okay, so the top one here suggests that an embryo is tested and one has a single allele for cystic fibrosis. We could, at that point, decide not to implant that embryo. Okay, we could decide not to do that at all. A fetus has two alleles for cystic fibrosis. Um, this is a fetus, this is not just an embryo, so this has started growing inside mum. Okay, at this point, a termination or abortion would be the possible decision that you might have to make. Obviously, the other decision possible being just to have the child and raise a child with cystic fibrosis. A 50-year-old woman has one copy of the allele for Huntington's disease. Now that she knows that she carries Huntington's disease, the decision should be to tell all her children as soon as possible so that they can have a think about it. If she was younger, she might have decided not to have any children, but at 50-year-old, she may already have children, and if she doesn't, she probably won't have any now. And finally, a 20-year-old woman has one allele for Huntington's disease. She might choose just not to have any children if she doesn't have any already. So we've got one more exam style question to have a little look at. Huntington's disease is a rare condition which can decrease life expectancy. A couple with a family history of Huntington's disease are considered embryo screening before having a baby. So they're going to have a look at the genes before deciding whether those embryos will get re-implanted into mum and will have an opportunity to grow into a baby. Any that do carry Huntington's disease, they're going to not re-implant into mum, and therefore those babies will not be able to grow. Um, Economic, social, and ethical issues, what I would do is just pause for a second and have a little think about these, maybe jot some notes down. Okay, so the three answers to this one then. An economical issue might be that it's expensive to provide treatment for Huntington's disease, in which case it would be better for them economically to not have a baby with Huntington's. A social issue is that they may have other children whose lives might be affected by having a sibling with Huntington's. And it might again be for those children who they already have, it might be uh, not better for them, but easier for them. Life might be simpler if the new child didn't have Huntington's disease. And an ethical issue for this is that unfortunately embryos are unable to consent. Some people would argue embryos don't need to consent, but the point is that these are all potential babies. They are all potential lives, and we are choosing which ones we will allow to become lives and which ones we will not. So this brings us to the end of our video. Um, I hope it's been useful. As usual, I hope your revision's going well, and thank you very much for watching.